Uh, Carl Linnaeus was the creator of the classification system. He was a biblical creationist, and so he was looking at um, trying to make a classification system based on the kinds. His work, unfortunately, though, has been sort of altered from what he had intended to do, and there was a bit of a problem with the classification system from the biblical um, kind that's used in the Bible. The reason was because of um, the Vulgate that came out. The Latin actually rendered the word kind as species, and so this caused a lot of problems later on. Uh, Charles Lyell um, actually came up with this false sort of concept of the biblical species, how they haven't changed, and called it the fixivity of the species, um, because the word species was being used and not kind. So, but the Bible was saying no, they're after their own kind, and he was arguing the Bible says that the species don't change. Now, that's not what the Bible was saying at all. The Bible was saying animals have um, breed after their own kind, and they have variation within their kind, which are the species. So it's been a confusion from the word kind to species. Um, Biological species refers to, can one creature mate with another creature? Are they fertile? And that's what speciation was. So the biblical kinds called Baramin, coming from the bara create and min kind, um, are actually more related, instead of to species, kind is more related to the family sort of genus area over here. It's more that area than this area here. So this is fixed. A kind doesn't become another kind. A kind can have variation and produce different genus and species from it. So that's where there's been differences. But the original biblical, the creator of the classification system believed this. Frank Marsh, they've got a couple of defining terms for about kinds. Two species that can hybridize to produce at least an embryo of the same kind, Barman, or two species that can hybridize with a common species, even if they can't hybridize with each other, but if they can hybridize with something, uh, both of them can hybridize with something where they can hybridize together. They're called a created kind as well. So that's even a more enlarged sort of view of it. So there's the classification system, and the biblical kind is more the family and genus sort of era. It's just the Vulgate was using the word species, and that's brought a lot of errors. And uh, actual Charles Darwin was actually trying to refute the fixivity of the species that Lyell invented. So it wasn't a biblical invention. He was He's actually from a evolutionist came up with the fixation of the species. Kinds are not the species is not the kind. Anyway, there is a few interesting things about the species. Let's have a look at some of these kinds and show you that they're bigger than just the genus. So we have ligers. They're the largest cat living today. A tiger and a lion. There's a wolfen, which is a fertile cross-genetic hybrid of a bottlenose dolphin and a false killer whale. There's a zonkey. So you can see that they cross genus into family groups. So it's not just about species here when it's talking about kind. If they can breed like these ones, then they would be considered the kind. Anyway, that's the terminology out of the way. Now we'll just have a look at what Darwin was saying way back then. Darwin had a problem, and he said that one of the biggest problems he has for his theory was the fossil record was not showing actual evolution, and he believed from common descent. So basically, there should have been a track record of this fossils coming up to the present day with past fossil records of the transitional forms. But he's saying here there's basically why is there none of this? Why is it swarming with creatures straight away in the Cambrian record, which is a real problem. He's using the word Silurian, but Silurian, but back then it was actually that was a much larger sort of area, and it included the Cambrian as well. So is the fossil record incomplete after 120 years? They've got basically they've found over 1 billion fossils. There's 100 million fossils in museums. There's 250,000 phyla that have been found. Is it incomplete? It doesn't seem to be. It seems to be they've found everything, well, most of the stuff that they've been looking for. So problem is there's massive gaps between these different families and genuses. So have a look at what's actually happening in science. Yeah, so evolution believes in a morphology where one common cell is branched off into the different families and animals and produced all this variation. That's what evolution is requiring. Lyell, with the fixity of the species, was saying back in creation, they were all the species were created and they haven't changed, and that is a straw man fallacy because it's not really what is believed, and it's very easy to refute. But the actual biblical model, creationist model, is more like the different kinds, Barrowman, and they branch off into species, like trees, but they actually come back to common kinds. So this here matches the fossils where there's 250,000 known fossils of different species that have been found in the fossil record. So this matches more clearly what's actually being found, because today we've got millions of different species, but back then we've only found 250,000, which means there was less and they've become more, which is what we see here. And we don't see this kind of tree happening. If we look at the dinosaurs, the evolutionists have made a tree where they've made all these linking dinosaur to dinosaur and try to show how they all group together. But the reality of there's about 50 types of dinosaurs here, and there's 2,100 fossils that have been found. What is the reality of what is actually being found? A creationist redrew this to match actually the data, the science, the fossils, and you'll see that there's actually no joining fossils at all between any of the dinosaurs. They all look just like the creationist model, a forest that has variation at the top but not anything at the bottom. So this is what the creation model predicts, and this is what actually is found. If we look at another drawing evolutionists were using, and this is to do with the vertebrates, the vertebrate forms. We see that there's all these joining between the different vertebrates, and when you actually look at the evidence, there is no transitional fossils linking these vertebrates together at all. So the dinosaurs, no transitional fossils. The vertebrates, no transitional fossils. This is the science. This is paleontology's results. There has been some transitional fossils put forward. There's one from Pakistan. The Pakistan's found this animal, and they drew this really neat picture here. But swimming, transitional form, and it's catching fish and all this. And actually, what was actually found, if you study, was these little fragments here. So that's actually what was found, and this is the drawing they recreated from them little pieces of fossil. So it's not exactly what I'd class as an exact science or empirical. Okay, so they found more. 7 years later, they found more of these creatures and more of the fossils, and they started putting it more a much better description of what it looked like. So this is far more of the fossil 7 years later, and when they sort of recreate what it actually probably looks like, it's nothing like an in-between type amphibian creature at all. Yeah, so nowhere near close to even being a transitional species. Now there is one which is commonly put forward. It's a transitional intermediate type, and that's called Tiktaalik. Now Tiktaalik is put forward, but the interesting thing about it is they've found footprints that predate Tiktaalik, and so you have to ask, how can the grandfather be younger than his grandchildren? So there's a big problem with Tiktaalik, because it seems to be the footprints predate any of Tiktaalik. Now, evolution says the tree of life from a simple cell. It's come up and it's branched off into all these different phylums and groups and trees and everything. And this is what they want. But unfortunately, what's actually being found from simple to complex. But what's actually been found is they've found vertebrates, fish, in the early Cambrian. So in the early Cambrian, they've got all sorts of different creatures, and vertebrates are there. So what does this all mean? Well, here's the imaginary fossil geological column that's supposedly showing millions of years between evolutionary stages of development from creatures to creatures, until way up the top there we see the man there, and way down the bottom you've got these apparently simple forms of life. But there is the problem with this model itself is there is no there's all these complex forms happening straight away, and there's no lead up to them at all. And since vertebrates have also now been found down the bottom, there's no record of this progression happening that Darwin and evolution required. But what creationists have said is this actual layout of the fossils like that actually fits far better, instead of long ages, fits far better where it's habitats and burial, so ecological, where the creatures have lived have been buried in their ecological places. So we have all the marine creatures and all buried in the sea together, and then further up we have the land and land dwelling creatures running around, and of course man would be the hardest to get buried in a flood event, so they would be the hardest ones to bury. They would be near the top, if anything. So this is all to do with where they were living. And if you were wondering about the dinosaur area there, yes, there's been found many modern animal types living amongst the dinosaurs. So it's over 120. So that's parrots, birds, platypuses, all sorts of creatures from ducks to flamingos are all found in this area here. So the land creatures definitely look like they were buried together. And this matches the flood event, this column. It does not show any evolutionary progression that evolutionists try to say. So this is what the evolutionists have tried to propose from simple branching out, but what actually has been actually found is in the fossil record is just like the biblical model here. This is what's actually found. There was proposed punctuated equilibrium. There's lots of other theories of monsters where the birds have eggs and they have dinosaurs come out of the eggs. So it's like the surprise monster theory. But this punctuated equilibrium was built upon the fact, came up with the reason why there was big fast jumps was because there's no actual evidence for evolution. So they came up with it happened so fast between groups that there's no fossil evidence for it. But that's actually just being in denial. What does science actually show? What does the actual science show? Does it show evolution? Does it show progression? No. It doesn't show that, it shows the biblical creation. That's what the actual observable and fossil evidence from paleontology shows. This punctuated equilibrium is just an attempt to try and come up with a way to keep Darwinism alive because the evidence is against it. So this is just a sad attempt, and there's no science behind any of this. This is just a sad, we've got no evidence, so we come up with something ridiculous to try and reason away the reason why the science doesn't back our theory.